Hi, this is Myra with Boutique Paint. Today we're going to make a decorative tin, and I've got these off of Amazon, and they just open up. This is a larger one of them, or maybe a medium. They come in all different sizes, and I'm going to start out by cleaning the top of it with just a little bit of just rubbing alcohol. And I just, like I've said so many times over and over again, that oils and whatnot in the manufacturing process, but also just oils from our hands get on metal. And so you want to make sure it's nice and clean, and then you want to make sure it's nice and dry. So I'm going to use this part of the tissue paper, or in this case it's rice paper. Get a Sharpie and draw around it. You want to cut on the inside of your line. That's why I'm okay with you using a pen or a Sharpie, because you drew on the outside of the tin. It's going to make a bigger piece than the top of the tin is, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. It makes sense in my head, but sometimes I explain things, I'm like, I don't know. Did that come out the way it should have? I'll give it a test run here. Yeah, that looks pretty good. This painted so it can start drying. And I'm only going to paint the top. And we want to make sure our edges are clean. There's nothing going over the side. And we're going to dry that. I'm going to go ahead and use a hairdryer. And once you've got the first coat dry, we're going to go ahead and put a second coat on. You don't have to do this step. The reason why I'm doing this step is because I want a light color showing through the paper, depending on what you're using. If you're using a thin paper, then you definitely want to paint it. If you're not using a thin paper, I can show you the difference. This is a thick paper, so you would be able to go ahead and just put that right onto this, and it's not going to make a huge difference. Here's a dry one that's got a second coat. It does lighten it up a bit. So depending on what you're wanting, and you can paint this any color also. Just play with it with the papers and see what you like. Okay. Make sure your tin, the top of it, is dry. Next, I'm going to take some of DIY's liquid patina, and I'm going to paint the top. And liquid patina, it works kind of like Mod Podge. So you can use it. You can use it as a top coat. You can use it as kind of a sticking agent or a glue. You can tell that this was not completely dry because I took the product off when I did that. On this particular one, I'm not too concerned because this paper is pretty thick. I'm going to take my IOD paint blade. I'm just going to make sure it is flat. I'm going to go ahead and do this one up also. And on this one, I am using a thinner tissue, but basically the same idea. Same thing. If this gets a little bit wrinkly, it's okay because the finished product isn't going to care. Alrighty. So now you want these to be completely dry before we move on to the next step. So these two are dry, So I want to go ahead and add a little bit of something. You can skip this step, or you could, like this one doesn't have a lot of details through here. So I just want to add a little something. So I grabbed some lettering and I grabbed my IOD ink. And because there's no really stark like blacks in this tissue, I'm going to go ahead and just use stone gray. I'll just get this nice and inked up. And you can put this really anywhere. The only thing is I suggest you make sure the writing's going the right direction. I sometimes stamp upside down. See how that just adds a little something? I think I'm going to do it down here too. I'll just do the one corner. All right. And then this one, I think I'm going to add some of the crackle. So you could either, if you have the original one of these, or if you have the vintage textures, you could use something in that. So I'm just going to stamp up this corner. And since this is a big piece, what I like to do is I like to usually, if it's possible, flip my piece onto this. Just kind of push down. You can do it as either as light or as dark as you want, but it just gives it a little extra. It's very subtle, but it just gives it something. So before I dry these, I decided I've got a little spot here where the paint's showing through, and I'm just going to take my stamp pad and just go around the edge of this and antique it. It'll help take care of any little imperfections. I can darken that up a little bit. But it gives it a nice vintage edge. So you're just taking your stamp pad and doing it kind of at a 45 or a little bit greater, and just getting some of that ink onto the edge to make it antique. Since a lot of the stamp pads that are gold or silver, they're more of an oil base. But see that if you have a piece of paper missing, it'll cover it right up. But we'll see how it reacts with the resin. But it's kind of an oil base. And so we're kind of mixing things, and I'm not sure how well it's going to work, but I really like how that looks. So I'm going to take the chance that this is going to work out okay, because that's got a good look. So I'm going to make sure that this is nice and set up before I move on to the next step on this. Okay, I've got my heat pad out. You do not have to do this on a heat pad. I'm going to, because it is very chilly out here. I didn't turn the heat back up when the temperature changed, so I know that it's going to take forever. But because we're just going to do a thin coat of resin over the top of these, I don't think it's going to take long for it to set up. So it's probably not going to take the full 24 hours to set up for this. And I'm just going to make up a small batch of this. And this stuff always pours like molasses on this clear. Now we're going to grab the other part of this. Get that scooped out. You're supposed to go slow, which I'm bad at. Okay. Why do you go slow? Because it helps it keep from getting super bubbly. So I'm just spreading this across, and I do want to get right up to the edge. And this should do some self-leveling. Get a little bit more in there. You could also use the UV resin. The nice thing about the UV resin is it's quick, but you have to have a UV light, but it sets it up immediately. It is more expensive, however, although I've noticed that the price is coming down on it. And then you just want to get it kind of smoothed out on there. And then you want to get your edges cleaned up. See, I've got a little bit of goo there. So I'm just going to take a baby wipe and carefully go around this, making sure. And you could make this thicker. I don't know if you can see that. It's pretty thin. I'm going to take my little torch and I'm going to go over the top, just in case there's any bubbles in this. And then I think I just want to add a little bit more. I can see a little bit of pocking, some dimples. I see a few dimples in the, so I'm just gonna add a little bit more. So something really important to look for while they're setting up, whether you're on a heat pad or not, is your table flat. And I am finding my table is not flat. So the resin is wanting to spill off or go pull at one end or the other. So I'm kind of creating a mess here. So I'm trying to get it cleaned up. But basically what I took is some cardstock and just put a little bit of cardstock on the end. It looks like it's trying to escape from. And that seems to be working pretty good, but I wanted to show you what is happening in real time. So it worked pretty well. One of the problems that I had, because I used the mat, and I wouldn't have used the mat normally, just because this is such a thin pour, but it is chilly out here, so I needed it to heat up quickly. You can see the ink that I did around the edge of this one mixed in with the resin, which I'm fine with. It kind of gives it a cool sheen in there, a little extra added something. I did get some bubbling, which I believe was because of the mat. When you let it do it naturally, the bubbles will come up a little bit, and I could have come back like a half hour later and used my torch again on these, and that probably would have taken care of it. I did have this little guy, he did an overpour, but I was able to just snap off the overpour, and that worked out pretty well. So I'm very tickled with the way they turned out. I think they turned out very pretty, and I love the gloss of the resin. So that's it for this week. If you have any questions, you can go to our website at www.boutiquepaint.com, and thank you so much for joining me. Bye.